John Kerry set to give a speech today on Mideast relations. Joining us now, Ed Klein, the author of Guilty as Sin. Ed, a lot going on now, certainly, and we're going to get to exactly how it appears President Obama doesn't really want to leave the stage. And part of that, though, that's big picture, but specifically this anti-Israel UN resolution where the administration just abstained. It was basically Barack Obama, again, voting present.
Yes. Well, I think he had this in mind for a long time. I mean, his relationship with Bibi Netanyahu has been so bitter. And I think this is his last shot at Netanyahu. And also, of course, trying to box in Donald Trump as he comes into office.
So that's the timing of it. You think if Hillary, they were assuming a Hillary Clinton presidency, it maybe would have unfolded otherwise. Now they're getting everything done that they can at the end, which is where they really were to begin with.
I think if Hillary had won, I think they would have voted and vetoed this resolution and allowed Hillary to carry on the ball.
To tee it up for her,
That's
like, let's give her a chance at Mideast peace.
Exactly. Now, they don't want Trump to get his shot in, and this is there's a lot of bitterness between, between Obama and Netanyahu. I mean, Netanyahu came here, talked in front of Congress, and tried to undermine the Iran deal. This is going on for a long time, and I think we're seeing the culmination right now.
Do you think the White House was surprised, though, by the backlash? Because you say it appears that they were planning this for a long time. This is our last shot at Netanyahu. And they thought maybe we're heading out the door, the president's in Hawaii, nobody's really going to notice. People have noticed, and people are speaking out, including Democrats.
Absolutely. And I don't think if you look at Mr. Rhodes, the Deputy National Security Advisor, who, by the way, was the guy who set up the Benghazi. It was really a video that caused the
narrative.
I mean, they didn't expect this kind of backlash.
He also set up the narrative on the Iran deal.
That's right.
Really interesting. It seems like President Obama is having a really tough time letting go, moving on from his office gracefully, even saying a few days ago that had he been running in 2016, he would have beat President-elect Donald Trump. Have you seen this before? Because you try to imagine George W. Bush acting this way when he gave the office over to President Obama.
We have a long tradition in this country when a president is finished with his term, he packs up his clothes, he goes home, and basically buttons his lip and gives his successor a chance to run. This is the first time in, 100 years since Woodrow Wilson that a president is going to stay in Washington. They've rented the Obamas, as you know, this huge 8,200 square foot mansion in the Kalorama section of Washington.
Where all the embassies are.
Right. There's 9 bedrooms.
The
one
Obama
of them,
embassy.
Yes. And there's 1 bedroom for Valerie Jarrett, of course.
Always is.
And they've been talking behind the scenes, according to my sources, about setting up essentially a shadow government.
So you say, and I've heard you talk about that, and some of the outside organizations that would assist on that. What issues, what areas do you think they would focus on the most? I mean, where are they going to try to preserve the legacy or fight back against the President-elect Trump?
Well, I think what we're going to see is something, this is a little exaggeration, but something that is going to look a little like the anti-Vietnam War demonstrations back in the 1960s. There's already talk about mass demonstrations during the inauguration in Washington. They're talking about storming, that's the word they use, the offices in Capitol Hill to try to stop the nominations of Trump's various appointees. They're talking Soros and a guy named Tom Steyer, the environmentalist, have already talked about devoting hundreds of millions of dollars to demonstrations, civil disobedience, op-ed pieces.
And building up sort of this big organization once he leaves office.
The president talked about that.
Yeah, he was on the Axe Files with David Axelrod opening up about those plans. Here's what he said.
With respect to my priorities when I leave, it is to build that next generation of leadership. Organizers, journalists, politicians. I see them in America, I see them around the world. 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds who are just full of talent, full of idealism. And the question is, how do we link them up? How do we give them the tools for them to bring about progressive change. And I want to use my presidential center as a mechanism for developing that next generation of talent.
You know, and when he talks about a next generation, too, it's you play that right off what Harry Reid said a little while ago. He played the bite where he said he admitted the Democrats don't have a new generation right now, that Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, they're all in their late 70s. So their bench is very old.
Very old. But, you know, Obama's going to have a lot of competition to set up this new government that he's talking about for the future. He's got the bitter enders in the Hillary Clinton machinery who also want to be the leaders of the Democratic Party. He's got Capitol Hill. We're talking about Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Elizabeth Warren, the left wing. I mean, there's going to be a lot of internecine battle inside the party for the heart and soul of that party.
You mentioned that. That's interesting, just sort of the bench and how many Democrats want to take the lead there. Many people saw the comment about President Obama saying he could have beat Mr. Trump as really a shot at Hillary Clinton, of all people.
It was. I mean, here, the president went around the country saying she was the most qualified candidate in history.
His legacy's on the line.
Forget Washington, Jefferson, Eisenhower, and so forth, right? And then his legacy was on the line, exactly. And what happened? He went to Michigan, North Carolina, he went to Florida, and each of those states, Pennsylvania, and each of those states went to Donald Trump.
And I feel like with that statement, it almost feels like he's going back to his sweet spot as a community organizer, as a protester, as an out-and-out leftist.
Yeah. Well,
he's always been there.
Always been there. I mean, that's exactly, we're going back to where he was when he first took office. Exactly.
And he wants to try to put that Obama coalition that Hillary Clinton could not put together.
Could not put together, exactly.
Ed Klein, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
I always appreciate you breaking all this stuff down. Good to see you this morning.
He's a smart guy.
Yeah, that's a thing or two.
Welcome back. President-elect Trump about to inherit a world of problems. Critics of the Obama administration point to a legacy of failed foreign policy so-called agreements that have made us weaker on the world stage. Here to break them down for us this morning, just a few of them, is Fox News contributor Jillian Turner. She was part of the White House National Security Council staff under both Presidents George W. Bush and President Obama. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. So you've seen deals like this on both sides of the aisle, but under this administration, there's been some very critical ones that are going to have implications going forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few people out there you're going to find, even supporters of President Obama, who are going to tell you that foreign policy has been his strength and that his legacy is going to be really solid there. There's a lot of questions open up during the course of his administration that are going to have to be answered.
A lot of chaos, a lot of open questions, as you said. One of those is the Iranian nuclear deal, which Trump has said he's going to tear apart or readjust. What are the implications of that agreement?
Well, you know, it's interesting because this deal obviously hasn't failed yet. It's still active right now. But I kind of view it's active. I view it as a fail for the American people and even for the Iranian people, who this was billed as being great for. You know, there was this whole groundswell of support from the Iranian citizens for this because this was going to open up their economy. It was going to help them grow their national economy. And the reality is that 10 years from now, if you check back with them, most of them are not going to have significantly better lives. They're not going to have more money. And that's going to be one of the major tragedies to come from this deal that no one's talking about.
The strategic imperative for us was preventing nuclear
Iran. Right. And then there's the whole reason it's bad for us. And it's even worse for us because I think part of what we gave up here when we sat down to the table just to negotiate here without any preconditions was the leverage we had over the Rouhani regime. And that's something that's going to hurt us in the long term.
Absolutely. All right, the Syrian red line, a lot of tough rhetoric that never materialized, and chaos, humanitarian disaster. What are the implications of that?
And people will push back on us and say, you know, it wasn't really an agreement. There was nothing signed. There was nothing binding. But I would argue that something the President of the United States commits to the international community is binding, and there's an obligation for him to really account for what has gone down since he reneged on that promise.
Why does he continue to defend that decision and say, hey, I know I didn't intervene the way that I said I would, but that was the right call?
I think part of the reason is because nobody wants the United States to sort of take the fall for the ensuing civil war that we've seen over the last 4 years, which has had atrocious humanitarian consequences, as well as the refugee crisis that's ensued. It's now gone global.
Not to mention ISIS.
We don't really want to sign up for the buck on that one. But I think that had he not reneged on this, some of this could have been potentially mitigated.
It was such a moment where America's prestige was diminished because we said something and they didn't stand up to it.
An ally. We sort of disappointed a whole slew of allies allies that have never really gotten over it.
Absolutely. All right, the Russia New START treaty.
So this is a treaty that was signed between the United States and Russia in 2010 when there was a lot of excitement and hope about the sort of
the reset.
President Obama.
This is the
right,
button,
you know,
right?
this was like everything, and the reality is that every new administration does get a clean slate. They get to decide how they're going to deal with our allies and our adversaries around the globe.
Yeah.
Many thought that President Obama and President Putin were going to have a working relationship, but I hold this up as a failed agreement in the sense that it kind of, there was all this hype, and we now look back 8 years later, or 6 to 7 years later, and we see how far the relationship has really deteriorated. We can't even agree on how to fight common adversaries in ISIS.
You're right. It's become an adversarial relationship where there was promise. All right, Trans-Pacific Partnership.
So last one is the TPP. This is counted as a failure because it's wilting on the vine, is basically what's come out of it.
And the president-elect has come out.
It was like a lot of hope but no chance
it.
for this to kind of happen, and now the president put a whole lot of personal capital into it. It's not going to come to be, and so it's just a whole lot of wasted energy. And
Jillian Turner, thanks a lot for your expertise.
Thanks.
And you're going to be with us all week, right?
I will.
All right, more to come on this then. And plenty of security threats to come that will